What's cooking, everybody? Episode 35 of the Slip and Wave podcast, man. A lot to get into this week, talking about Oscar Valdez's dominant performance over Miguel Berchelt. Going to get a little into the return of Adrien Broner. Going to talk a little bit about David Avanesyan stopping Josh Kelly over there in England. And I'm going to briefly touch on this weekend with Canelo Alvarez and Avni Yildirim. So let's get right into it. I'm just going to come out and say it flat out that I think that Oscar Valdez's performance against Miguel Berchelt is the best performance since boxing has come back from the COVID shutdown. That's my opinion, and if you watch my prediction on this last week, you know that I got this fight fucking 300% wrong. And I thought that Berchelt would be able to lure Valdez into a physical kind of brawl type fight. That's not what happened. Valdez outboxed him and stopped him in the 10th. Before I get into that, because I want to break that down a little more, I want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, there was the card on Showtime with Adrien Broner returning. Look, Robert Easter looked very sharp. Nice long jab, boxing on his toes. Otto Wallin looks very sharp against Dominic Brazil. Same kind of deal, boxing behind the jab. Had a couple rough rounds at the end, but, pretty much dominated the whole fight. And then it came down to AB, man. Same old shit, bro. Same old AB, man. He can do all this he wants about all the changes he made and everything he's doing different and da-da-da-da. But it's still a fucking guy with a lot of talent who doesn't throw his punches or stay switched on for 3 minutes. First of all, there's no way he won this fight. And that's everyone's talking about it, right? Santiago doubled him up and landed punches, if not more. Was clearly the busier in most of the rounds. I scored at 114, 113 Santiago. So could I say that it was a horrendous ripoff? No, but it was like a bad decision. And it was unanimous. One judge having it fucking, 9-3 or whatever. And it's the same old shit with this guy, man. He just doesn't let his hands go enough. And he's a good defensive fighter, but he has lapses where he kind of just shells up and let you hit him in the body and hit him in the gloves, and he just kind of takes it. And it's very you go, I go. He's not like a great counterpuncher all the time. He's just not switched on offensively all the time. It has no diversity. It's very predictable. It's kind of roll right hand, roll 2-3. It's all the it's the same couple of moves, and it's clear that he's got, the speed, the accuracy. He's a very accurate puncher. You can't take that away from him. He's very fucking accurate when he lets his hands go, and he's just not busy enough. And so, because he's not busy enough and he's not a defensive wizard, somebody like Giovanni Santiago, with no disrespect to him, with a lot less natural talent, can very much out hustle him, because he has so many just lapsing periods where he just rests on the ropes and takes body shots, man. And it's for somebody with that talent level. And to be honest with you, he's still the same fucking guy in the sense of, if you watch his post-fight interview, he's still like as cringy and fucking unwatchable as ever, and it's like, I guess there's a part of me, because I enjoyed watching him when he was younger. Like, I want to believe that he's going to be able to flip that around. I don't think so, man. I don't think he has this. He's got everything else, man. He's got all the fucking talent in the world. He's got the right people around him, but he doesn't have this. And unless he gets that straight, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. There's nobody at the top of 140 or 147 that he has any chance against. That's just reality. So, I mean, I guess congratulations on the win, but you didn't win that fucking fight. So it is what it is. In England, over on the zone, David Avanesyan stops Josh Kelly in the 6th round. This was a pretty big upset because anytime I see the British commentary and whatever talking about Josh Kelly, they talk about, this virtuoso kid with this crazy talent, crazy hand speed, da-da-da-da, and when the fight first starts, and I've seen this a couple of times, when the fight first starts, you can see what they're talking about, right? The speed is crazy. He's like moving around the ring, and it's very aesthetic, and it looks good, and he hits hard. Clearly, he hurts Avanesyan at the first part of the fight, puts him on his ass. It's very explosive, and then there's something about him that just gradually starts to break down over the course of the fight. Like with Ray Robinson, if you watch this fight with Ray Robinson, it's just like that what he does didn't stand up at that level. And so with Avanesyan, the sheen came off it real quick. Like that shine, that sparkle on his game came off it after the 2nd or 3rd round. He gets this cut on the back of his head. You know what I'm saying? He's trying to keep Avanesyan off of him, and he's boxing well, but it just gets to the point where the physicality of Avanesyan gets to Kelly, and he's able to just really outmuscle him and kind of outpro him. And he couldn't stand up to that pressure in his corner, throwing the towel. There is some kind of disconnect there. Like, I think it looks better than it is. It looks better than it is effective, what he does, if that makes sense, whereas Avanesyan, it's kind of the opposite, where what he does is more effective than what it looks like. You know what I'm saying? And you see at this level, if you haven't fought at this level a bunch, it's a different thing. It's a different thing to look really flashy against a genuine, legitimate top 10 contender that has, no losing is not in his mind at all, So I thought that was it was interesting. And I like watching Kelly fight. I watched some of the early fights in his career, and I was like, yo, this kid is fucking scary. But as he stepped up, and I don't know if it's weight cuts or whatever, but just like his durability and his consistency, I think consistency is really what it is. It's kind of like AB. There's lapses where it just kind of turns off, and he either stands and shells up, or all that shit where he's like making you each individual punch miss so clearly at the beginning of the fight. You know what I mean? That starts to erode a little bit, and he starts taking punches he shouldn't take. I'm not really sure. He's a young guy, and he's super talented, so I think he's gonna, he'll make a comeback and he'll have another go at this. But there's another dimension he's got to take. I'm not really sure how to articulate what that is, but there's another layer of his game that he's got to develop, a certain grit that he just doesn't have right now at this contender level. So, great win for Avanesyan. He's like right at the top of his game right now, and I think hopefully a great learning experience for Kelly, and not something that breaks him. So let's get to the main event here. Fucking Oscar Valdez stopping Miguel Berchelt in the 10th round. Fucking leveled him. Like that. 1-punch knockout. And like I said at the top of this episode, in my opinion, that right there is the top performance since the COVID lockdown. Since we've been fighting in these bubbles and shit, this is the best performance, because this is what I thought was going to happen, right? I thought, because if you've seen Valdez fight before, lower levels of opposition have lured him into really physical, drag him out fights. Adam Lopez and, Jason Velez. I'm not saying these are bad opponents, but I would have picked Berchelt to beat any of those guys. You know what I mean? So I thought that Berchelt, with his relentlessness, with his size, his physicality, the fact that he's been the title holder at 130 for a long time, I just thought that he was going to be able to kind of out-activity Valdez, even if Valdez could keep it pretty for a second, and that Berchelt would get a head of steam going, maybe clip him and hurt him, and then that would be it, right? That's what I thought was going to happen. I think that's what a lot of people thought was going to happen. And that's not what happened at all. And I'm telling you, it's because Valdez's game went up 2-3 levels. Like, if I had any idea he could do that, I would have picked him. You know what I'm saying? Because he was at a completely different level of slickness and boxing skill than Berchelt. And it all started with the jab. It all started with the jab. You know, the first round, he's a little antsy. He's swinging kind of, you know, maybe a little too big. But the second round, he starts to relax into his movement and his upper body movement. He starts letting that jab go. And by the end of the second round, Berchelt's nose is gushing blood and really puffy, almost exclusively from the jab. You know what I'm saying? And Valdez with the head movement, it was like every time Berchelt tried to set and throw a combination, he couldn't land anything. But, you know, Valdez would make him miss a couple of times and then smother him and then turn him, right? You know what I mean? He'd be on the outside, miss. He'd get real close and then he'd turn out and he'd get out of the corner. So he didn't give Berchelt really any rope time. There was, you know, he was never stationary for Berchelt to just sit down on a combination. And then in the fourth round, right, he hurts Berchelt really badly and drops him at the end of the fourth round. I kind of thought maybe he's going to stop him here. It had that look, you know. But in the fifth, I felt like he keeps that assertion. But by the sixth and the seventh, Berchelt actually starts to make the effort to come forward and try to, you know, make his presence known. And he doesn't really land anything. Like, he's swinging and he's on the front foot, and you can see Valdez is having to work harder. But he really couldn't land much of anything effective or consistently. You know, there was one stretch where he's throwing. He must have thrown 10, 12 punches, and he landed, I think, one. So it was one of those rounds where it was like he was kind of putting his last hit of effort into it. Because after the seventh round, man, it was really all Valdez, and he found his full boxing rhythm, and I think he started to hit a head of steam and just took over the fight completely. Now, by the time the knockout came in the 10th round, like, I could have been cool with the corner stopping it at the end of the 9th. I really could have been. And then there was 2-3 moments in the 10th where I would have been cool with the ref stopping it. So, you know, while this is a crazy knockout and it's one of the best knockouts, you know, in a while, this is one that maybe didn't need to happen. And maybe, I think, it's weird. As I watch more boxing, as I get a little older, I'm a little more sensitive to knockouts, which is a weird thing. Like, you know, it's part of why you watch boxing is the shock of the knockout. But the more I watch it and understand, like, the craft, the more jarring that is, particularly if it seems like it's unavoidable. I don't know what that is. But I'm definitely getting a little more sensitive to knockouts. But the thing that was beautiful about this fight, aside from Valdez's great footwork and great strategy, was that he put it all together, man. He put all because you've seen him do each thing individually sometimes. And even in the last fight, you could see him trying to make that transition into a boxer, and Velez was just awkward enough to make that complicated for him. And this one, it just all came together, man. He was switching southpaw and throwing little feints, and it would kill Berchelt's rhythm every single time. He would switch stances for a sec. He might not even throw anything. He'd just have him southpaw, feint, roll out of the corner, go back to his stance. Like, the jab was money the whole fucking time. The jabs and the feints and the turns off the ropes, all the stuff that he was doing defensively to keep Berchelt occupied and keep him turning and keep him almost chasing his own tail. That's the shit that won him the fight. Because by the time he starts sitting down to, you know, throw power punches, Berchelt is open for it. Because he's been popping him with the jab, popping him with the jab, sticking it in his stomach. And Berchelt's got his hands here. Every time he sees the jab, he's trying to paw it. So he goes to paw the jab, and it turns into a hook. Boom. And that just kept happening over and over again. The jab and the left hook, you know, confusing him, not sure what's going to come at him. So I'm just very impressed with Oscar Valdez. This is one of those times where I love being wrong. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I did the prediction on this fight, and I was feeling pretty strong about it. And this is one where, I just love that this is how it went. It really was a great performance. And for me, anybody at 130, he's in the mix. I'm not saying you got to say he's going to win, but anybody at 130, I'm talking Tank, I'm talking Shakur Stevenson. This guy's in the mix. You got to give it to him. The only thing I'm going to say about Berchelt is they said he weighed 146 the night of the fight, which means he put on 16 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and guess that he didn't have like a great weight cut, and his punch resistance looked like it. You know what I'm saying? Like, this fight looked similar to Jermell Charlo and Jason Rosario. He just couldn't really get off the way he wanted to. And you could see, I don't know if Rosario had a bad weight cut. I'm just saying that's what the fight kind of looked like. He just didn't look like he had great punch resistance, and he didn't really look like he could pull the trigger the way he wanted to. I don't really know what's next for him. That's a big rebuild. He may want to move up to 135. He's such a big guy. He's a welterweight the night of these fights. It seems like lightweight might be a more appropriate weight class for him. And, that's pretty much all I got to say about that fight. I was really impressed with the whole performance. Next weekend, we got Canelo and Avni Yildirim. I did a breakdown of why exactly this fight is happening. I'll make sure I leave that in the description here. But essentially, this is a mandatory, Yildirim has been the mandatory for 2 years now, basically. And Canelo just happens to be the title holder fulfilling that obligation. And I think this one's pretty cut and dry. I watched Yildirim fight Anthony Durrell again, and it's just, I'm sure he's improved. I'm sure he's gotten better since that night. But I think his nature, like basically who he is as a fighter, is going to be the reason he can't win this fight. He's just too come forward, gloves up high. It's a little too basic for somebody with the finesse and the nuance of Canelo Alvarez. So even if it goes 12, like, I could see Canelo getting this guy out. I could see Canelo doing a light 12 and just not really taking any punishment and keeping it smart. And this guy's tough enough to survive. But it's just hard to know. Yildirim definitely has some skills, and he can throw some combinations, but I just can't. It would be hard for me to imagine. This is what I was saying last week with fucking Berchelt and Valdez. But it would really be hard for me to imagine that he would be able to consistently land anything on Canelo. There's always that puncher's chance, but between not having fought in 2 years, Canelo fought 2 months ago, it just seems like a really one-sided fight that probably doesn't do that much for Canelo, but it does allow him to keep a belt, and then hopefully later down the line, this year, hopefully, we're going to see him against Billy Joe Saunders in May, hopefully Caleb Plant by the end of the year, and then maybe we have an undisputed champ at 168, which would be really cool. So that's it, guys. That's episode 35 of the Slip and Wave podcast. It's crazy. I've been doing 35 episodes. Stay tuned for next week. I'm gonna have my first guest next week, you guys. So if you want to follow my Instagram, I'm gonna be posting more about that in the next couple of days, and I will also be keeping up with the tutorials a little better, so you can expect more of those soon. And yeah, that's episode 35. Thanks, guys. Peace.